Okay, so you sent over some information on this Alessandro Ciattaglia and his work with cage aquaculture. And I got to say, the term cage expert, that's not something you see every day.
Yeah, it really makes you wonder, what exactly does a cage expert do?
Right. Like when I picture aquaculture, I think like, those huge salmon farms you see in documentaries.
Mm.
But this guy, his LinkedIn and his ResearchGate page, they point to projects all over the Mediterranean.
Yeah, the Mediterranean is a really interesting spot for aquaculture. You've got a lot of sunlight, of course, but also strong currents in some areas and, increasing environmental concerns.
So it sounds like designing cages for that environment, you need someone who knows what they're doing.
Exactly, someone who understands not just, how to build a cage, but like the mooring systems, the water currents, and of course the specific types of fish being raised because different fish have different needs, right?
Totally. And speaking of knowing what they're doing, this guy Ciatalia's profile says he's designed and installed over 700 cages.
Wow, 700. That's incredible.
Yeah, that's not just a hobby. That's a serious operation.
For sure, for sure. And it looks like he's worked on some really innovative projects too. One that caught my eye was installing cages in a really high energy offshore environment. That kind of project, you can't just like drop a cage in the water and hope for the best.
Right, you need something that can withstand some serious forces.
Exactly. And that's where that deep understanding of engineering and ecology comes into play.
It's like building a fortress, but underwater and for fish.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And then on top of that, he's got experience with both floating and submersible cages.
Oh yeah, I was wondering about those. What's the advantage of having a cage that goes underwater?
Well, for one thing, it can protect the fish from storms. Think about those big waves you see during a hurricane. You don't want your fish getting tossed around like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Plus, I imagine it keeps them safe from predators, too.
Absolutely. Anything trying to get a snack from above or below is going to have a much harder time with a submersible cage.
So it's like a win-win for the fish and the farmers.
Exactly. And it just goes to show that this guy, Ciatalia, he's not just building cages, he's thinking about the whole ecosystem.
Right. It's about finding that balance between raising fish and protecting the environment.
Exactly. And that's something we should talk about more because his work with the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization really highlights that.
Okay, so we're going to get into the sustainability side of things next. This is already fascinating stuff.
Oh, yeah. This is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Alessandro Ciattaglia and the world of cage aquaculture.
So it's not just about protecting the fish, it's about making sure the whole industry is sustainable, right?
Right. And that's where working with the FAO comes in because they're all about promoting sustainable aquaculture globally.
Yeah, makes sense. And his LinkedIn profile mentioned projects in North Africa and the Middle East. Anything stand out to you there?
Well, it seems like he's involved in a lot more than just, the design and installation of cages. He's working on guidelines, best practices for sustainable cage aquaculture.
So kind of like setting the standards for the whole industry.
Yeah, exactly. And that's crucial, especially in regions like North Africa and the Middle East. They face some serious food security challenges, and sustainable aquaculture could be a big part of the solution.
Right. It's not just about growing more food. It's about growing it in a way that doesn't harm the environment.
Exactly. And that brings us to those publications you sent over about site selection.
Oh, yeah. Especially the ones about Saudi Arabia, because I was thinking about it and like, you can't just put a fish cage anywhere, right?
Absolutely not. I mean, think
No.
about it. You've got to factor in water temperature, salinity currents. You don't want to disrupt sensitive ecosystems like coral reefs.
And you've got to make sure it doesn't interfere with, local fishing and other activities.
Exactly. There's a lot to consider. And even within a region like the Red Sea, those factors can vary a lot.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So it sounds like Ciattalia's expertise in both the engineering side and the marine biology side, that's got to be invaluable.
Oh, absolutely. He's like a detective for sustainable aquaculture.
I like that. Finding the perfect spot for these underwater farms so they can thrive without, messing things up.
Exactly. And his work in Saudi Arabia shows how important this is becoming globally.
Right, because more and more countries are looking at aquaculture to, help feed their population sustainably.
Exactly. And speaking of making this information accessible, one of the publications you sent, feasibility study model for cage farming business of small, medium size.
Yeah, that one caught my eye too, because it seems like he's trying to make this knowledge available to everyone.
Exactly. He's not just focused on, massive industrial operations. He wants to help smaller businesses, communities develop their own sustainable aquaculture practices.
And that's got to be so important, especially in developing countries where, resources might be more limited.
Absolutely. And another thing I noticed is how many of his publications have multiple authors. It seems like collaboration is key in this field.
Yeah, makes sense. You've got marine biologists, engineers, environmental scientists, even economists all working together.
It's really a team effort to make sure aquaculture is done right.
It really speaks to how important collaboration is for tackling these big global challenges.
Exactly. And, that 2023 publication, we talked about the one about mapping aquaculture potential in the UAE.
Yeah. What was it about that one that caught your eye?
Well, it shows how Chattalia's thinking goes beyond, just individual cages or farms. He's looking at the big picture, like how can we develop aquaculture strategically to maximize food production and environmental sustainability at the same time?
So it's like he's creating a roadmap for the future of sustainable seafood.
Exactly. A blueprint for making sure we can feed everyone without, destroying the planet in the process.
And it's interesting that he was doing this work in the UAE because they've been investing a lot in aquaculture lately, haven't they?
They have. They recognize that it's a way to improve their food security, especially in a region with limited freshwater resources.
Right. So it's not just some abstract academic exercise. It's driven by real-world needs.
Exactly. And I think what's really exciting is how people like Ciatalia are changing the way we think about aquaculture. It's not just about, maximizing yield anymore. It's about working within the limits of our planet.
It's about recognizing that we have to find a way to produce food sustainably if we want to, keep feeding everyone in the long run.
Exactly. And that's what makes this work so important.
So as we wrap up here, what's the one big takeaway you hope our listeners are left with?
I think Alessandro Ciattaglia really represents a new breed of expert, someone who can bridge the gap between really specialized knowledge and, actually solving real world problems.
Right, he's not just a cage expert, he's a problem solver, an innovator, and really a champion for doing things the right way.
Exactly. He shows us that even something as seemingly simple as a cage can be a powerful tool for change if it's designed and used thoughtfully.
And his story really highlights how important it is to think about the food we eat and where it comes from.
Absolutely, because the choices we make about our food, they have ripple effects all over the world.
So next time you're enjoying some delicious, sustainable seafood, take a moment to appreciate the people like Alessandro Ciattaglia, who are working behind the scenes to make that possible.
Because their dedication and expertise are helping to create a healthier, more sustainable future for all of us.